The last thing we're going to look at in this section is when you're given 2 points in the plane, how do you find the distance between them? And we'll see a little application right afterwards. So essentially, I'm trying to find the length of this line segment connecting 2 points that I've called x1, y1 and x2, y2. And way of getting that length is to create a right triangle like so, and this leg of the triangle here has a length that corresponds to the change in x. This other leg here has a length that corresponds to the change in y, so delta x and delta y. And therefore the distance that I'm looking for is the hypotenuse of this right triangle. And with the Pythagorean theorem, right, the sum of the squares of the lengths of the 2 legs of that right triangle are equal to the square of the hypotenuse, which is our distance in this case. Okay, and our distance is going to be the square root of that delta x squared and added up to delta y squared. And what's delta x? Like I said, it's a change in x, so it would be the largest of the x coordinates minus the smallest one, and delta y would be y1 minus y2. Okay, and if you replace in here, we get a formula. So x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, square rooted, is the distance. So it's just a Pythagorean theorem. So here's a little problem. So the diameter of a circle has the endpoints -2, -1, and -8, 6, and we want to find the radius of that circle. So there's a point -8, 6, and another one here, maybe -2, -1, and this is the diameter of a circle. Okay, so there's essentially a circle that goes through those 2 points, and those 2 points form a diameter. And what we would like to get is, so this is the center of the circle, but we're interested in getting the value of the radius. So how do you find the value of the radius? We're going to find the value of the diameter. It's d also. I'm going to call it d, but it also corresponds to the distance between the 2 points, as you can see. So applying our formula, d is going to be square root of... Now, what's x2, what's x1? You can choose whatever you want for x2, as long as, you could say that x1, y1 is -8, 6, and x2, y2 is -2, -1. Okay, so x2 doesn't have to be the largest of the 2 numbers. But actually here it's actually the case that x2 is larger than x1, like -2. So, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so the formula will still work no matter how what you choose for x1 and y1, and for x2 and y2. Just make sure that if you choose this for x1, well, y1 has to be the y coordinate associated with that value. Okay, so here we're going to do -2 minus. Careful here, it's minus, but x1 is -8, so I'm going to put a bracket here. So it's going to be -8, which will turn out to be +8 eventually. Squared, and then 6, no, not 6, you see here, I'm making a mistake. It's -1 minus 6, okay, squared, okay. And so this is -2, wait, let's go slowly, -2 plus 8 squared. Okay, and that's going to give us -2 plus 6, that's 6 squared, plus -7 squared. So let's just erase this here. This reminds me of a common mistake that I see. I often see students doing minus something like 36 minus 49. And this is completely wrong. So this minus 7 squared, careful, it's not the same as minus 7 squared. They're not the same. So if you use your calculator in particular to type this and you mistype it, okay, if you don't put the brackets, your calculator is going to do the 7 squared first and then multiply by minus 1. It's going to give you minus 49, which would probably explain the mistake the student has made here. Where minus 7 squared, that's really minus 7 times minus 7. So in other words, 2 minus signs gives you a plus. So this is actually 49. So it's plus 49 here, not minus 49. So when you add this up, you get 85. So root of 85 is the value of the diameter, and we want the radius. The radius is half the diameter, so it's going to be root of 85 over 2. So this is what we're looking for. Now we're going to find what's called the midpoint. What's the midpoint? Midpoint is kind of related to the previous problem. So we've got 2 points, and the midpoint is the point in the middle of the line segment connecting those 2 points. So this is the midpoint. Okay, how do you get the midpoint? Maybe I can show you with actually not coordinates, but just numbers. Let's say you have 2 numbers, 3 and 10, and you want to get the midpoint. So the point in the middle of 3 and 10. What do? Try to figure out a way of getting that point. Now the answer is not, a common mistake is students doing 10 minus 3 divided by 2. If you do this, you can check, you're going to get 7.5. 7.5 is 3.5. So imagine that, you know, this is 3, 4, 5. So 3.5 is right there. It's clearly not in the middle. So clearly there's a mistake that we're making when we're doing this. So this is not what we want to do. We can use that eventually, but that's not what we want to do. A good way of finding the midpoint is, imagine these are the grades on your last 2 tests, 3 and 10. The midpoint would be actually the average, right? Of the or the average would be right in the middle of these 2 grades, right? So if you take the average of 3 and 10, you're going to get your midpoint. So 3 plus 10 divided by 2, that's going to work. 13.5. So that's what is that? That's 6.5, which, and you can believe it's pretty much in between 3 and 10. So this is how we get the midpoint. So the midpoint is the average. Well, we can apply this to our points in 2 space. So the midpoint here will have coordinates that are the average of the x and y coordinates. So if I take the average of the x and the y coordinates, I get the coordinates of my midpoint. So let's use this to find the center. So let's say here, this is the center of the circle. It's halfway between the 2 endpoints that form the diameter. So how do I get the coordinates of that center? Well, I use the midpoint formula. So example, find the center of the previous circle. So C will be, I'm going to take the average of the 2 coordinates of the point. So the points were minus 8, 6, and minus 2, minus 1. So I take minus 8, I add minus 1, minus 1, I add minus 2. I divide by 2, that's the average, and 6 plus minus 1 divided by 2, that's the y coordinate. So I guess C is minus 8 minus 2 is minus 10 over 2, minus 5. 6 minus 1 is 5, so 5/2. And this is the center of the previous circle.